Okay, this is, I guess, part two of tutorial about using for loops. Kept the code pretty close to what I had before, but to save a little time, I've tweaked a few things. Let me just run this so you can see what we get. So we have our setup here, no big deal. The main thing here is in our for loop, we have no fill, and then our rectangle. And again, so we assign 0, we check the condition if I is less than width, and then we go ahead and add 50 each go around. And I've just set that to the X position. So you can see the rectangle working across the page. A new parameter for those working with rectangle. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this defines the X, Y position of it. 50 and 50 is the size, and 10, if you just use a single value there, is the rounding going on the edge of the rectangle. So if you were to carry this out, you can specify the individual bevel rounding on the various corners. Okay, so what I want to do here is something like this, but I want it to fill the whole entire thing as a XY grid. So to do this, we need a nested for loop. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, instead of putting the rectangle in here, I'm going to put it in a little custom class, or custom function. And in this tutorial, I'm not really trying to make anything overly visually interesting. I just want to demonstrate some of the principles. So let's dive right in. And still selecting here. Let's copy that. And I'll paste that in there. I'm going to change this to J. Right, and because I added a second one here, I want to go ahead and make sure that add another bracket to our curly bracket to match up. So run into an error. All right, so this is the first one here is going 50 across, and this one's going to go 50 across. But I is in the X parameter. What I want to do here is add J to the Y parameter. And let's go ahead and play that. Right, so you can see I get my full grid. Again, I mentioned this for those of you in the class. There are multiple ways to do this. The value could be anything, the condition could be anything, and the iteration could be anything. I could have just set this at 0, figure out exactly how many times I wanted, so how many blocks I wanted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if I wanted 12 of these in there, then I would have made I with 12, iterate I plus plus, and then I just would have multiplied it by whatever I want the spacing to be. The spacing here happens to be 50. So either way, I can use a single, I could just iterate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and multiply it by some factor to get a larger spacing, or I can just already put that in there. And to make things easier, one thing, since I've done that twice, you can see I've used 50 a lot. Okay, so that's probably a bad thing to do over and over go through my code. So I'm just going to call this float space equals 50, and I'm going to make this space. Okay, and just because this is, just a rectangle in here, certainly would make sense to just leave it in here. It's doing what I want. But if we were going to draw something a little more intricate, we're going to add things, it would be a good idea to house all those graphic instructions inside a custom function, and then we'd use something to move those different instances of that function across the page. So let's go ahead and do void tile. Yeah, we'll just do tile. And I'm going to go ahead and take that. So this actually is just going to be 0 and 0. And let's go ahead and pull fill out of there. And what I want to do is just add maybe a random color to this. And then obviously I want to make this work around the page. Right now, if I just did this, it's just going to say 0, 0 every single time. I'm not feeding any of these numbers into as a variable, but to move it, let's go ahead and play. So you can see they're just piling up on top of each other there. What we want to add is push matrix, and I always finish this off first, so I know they kind of open and close the push and pop matrix. And now I'll do translate, and here we want to say I and J. So again, this will go through and it'll start out be 0, and then this is going to go through and go across. It's going to do the column. So we'll do, just start off with 0, and then this is going to go 0, 50, or whatever I had. Yeah, 50, 100, 150, 200. And then this will be 50, and then it's going to go 0, 50, 100, 150. Let's go ahead and see if this is working. See if I have any. Okay, so you can see they're filling up in there on top of each other. Let's go ahead and put fill, and I'm just going to call that C. So this is the value here. I want to, there's several ways I can do it, but I want to illustrate that you could pass a variable into this. So let's say float C. So this is going to have a variable, and I'll just go ahead and reuse C. And let's say random float C equals random. Let's go from 100 to 220. C, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's see what we get here. So, getting the little jitter out of this, let's go up to the top here and say random seed. It'd help if I could spell random seed, and we'll just say 1. I'll play that again. Right, so now the random number sequence that's generated is always going to be set to the same thing. So it's generating a new one, it's picking through here, it's putting that value into tile. So when tile gets called, it takes that and puts it into this thing. And again, you can see I've used C. This could be called dude color. Okay. Dude color, probably not the best name. But still do the same thing. The variable here doesn't matter what name you use here, just because of scope. This is all contained within here. All tile cares about that it gets a float. And I'm using C so that I can pass it down into these instructions. So this thing has to, this would have to be C if this is called C. But this could be any variable name whatsoever. So I'm just going to name it C. Because I know I'm going to get C, I'm going to put it in here, and then this is going to go into this. That's just the way I like to do it. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do with this, I have space set up as 50. Let's go ahead and make that 100. Oops. All right, so again, now it shows that if only one parameter, I can change the spacing as well as the size of this rectangle, okay, as it works through here. Now, one thing I wanted to show, since I had some code typed up earlier, I don't want to get into how to use fonts and how to load this code. Let's see, where did I delete that? So font equals create font, Arial, and 38 maybe. Make sure that runs. Okay, it does. And I did this other custom function down here. Do a little auto formatting. And what I did, so I have a float I and j that I'm going to pick up from here. And again, we haven't really talked about text. Don't worry too much about it. But I'm basically going to say draw some text. I'm going to print the letter I with a little space, a little slash, and then print the J, whatever those values are, and we're going to position them. We're centering the text, and we're going to put it halfway in the middle of space. Remember, the space is 100, so it's going to do 50. Should put it right in the middle. So let's, what did I call that? Label. What did I do wrong here? Label. Oh, it needs the two values. My bad. Sorry. And J. So I did this with the idea that you could see how the values were translating to each of the cubes. So 0, 0, 100, 200, 0. Okay, so you get the point. So I just want to print the coordinates. I don't know if it's a helpful thing to get a sense of what the for loop is doing as it checks width and height, but it's something to refer to. So if you want to, I'll post this code so that you can go ahead and use the label if you want to put this onto your text. I also wanted to show one last thing. Let's change space actually. So let's say space is equal to mouse x plus 10 because we don't want them to be too small with our tiles. Okay. So at the beginning it doesn't draw anything. In fact, maybe we could make a little condition out of this. Say if mouse x, can't spell, if mouse x is greater than 0, go ahead and change it. The reason I put that code in there is so at the very beginning we'll go ahead and space it at 100, so I'll actually get some tiles onto the screen, and then if I move my mouse over the canvas so that it's greater than 0, then it'll start obeying this little rule here. Let's go ahead and fire that off. Alright, so you can see we have our normal spacing, and if I pop this over, you can see it's now changing the size of the tiles. And the color's changing a little bit just because the way the random seed is working and how it's going through the code. One thing you should notice though, in changing that color, is watch the left-hand side. It's going to be this side right here. Watch how those colors always stay the same as they work through. This just tells us that this is 0, 1, 2, as it's working its way down through the seed of the code. This is the first time down the strip. But the number changes when it gets to here because I keep making it big or small. Whatever this one was, that value, it goes back up to the top of the page. I don't know if it's kind of a tough thing to see. Let's see if I can do it down here. Should make this maybe a color field, but you can see how this one here is a little bit darker, and you'll watch if I make this a little bit broader. Now that darker one makes it up to the top of column number 2. Okay? We're just cycling through all these random numbers, and you can see they're kind of moving along these columns as more and more tiles are added or subtracted. Sorry, a little email warning there. Okay, so again, this is more of just a demonstration, an example of how these things are working together. And again, you saw at the very beginning we could take these numbers and we're just using them to move something across the page. So it could have been rectangle and fed those in there, so that just did that. And then here we're using translate so that we could do lots of other circle, let's say space 2, space 2, and 20 and 20. So it wouldn't be circle, it would be ellipse. Sorry, I was looking at code for another program that would say circle. Okay, so now I see that was in there. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's say 50 and 50, because that's the diameter. All right, so as we pile these things on top of each other, having a tile is going to make it a lot easier because we just have to put them in here and then move them across with push and pop matrix. Remember, within the for loop, always to have the push and pop matrix because is it goes through here because it's going through a loop over and over again. If you don't basically reset the transformation for each time that it's going through, you're going to get a little bit of disaster. Let's just go ahead and do that. Probably get an error. Yeah. You can see it's trying to do it. See how it's piling up as it's increasing the size of the transformation. So, all right, one last time. Okay, that's about 15 minutes of code tutorial magic, or maybe not so. But hopefully this was helpful and gives you at least a visual reference of how the nested for loops are working, and maybe some ideas about how you might set up some variables to control how the spacing works in those for loops, and maybe some mouse interaction.